Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And may I first begin by thanking all members of the House for coming on Friday and apologising for the fact that we have had to convene today. But, Mr. Speaker, the reasons why we are convening today are partly to be found in the fact that today is the 29th of March. And it was today, Mr. Speaker, which this House voted some months and years ago should have been the day on which we left the European Union. However, we are today where we are, precisely. And I do not intend to review how and why we have arrived at this point, but to explain, Mr. Speaker, the motion which the government is placing before the House. On the 21st of March of this year, the Council agreed a decision. If the withdrawal agreement is approved, then we have a legal right as a country to an extension to the 22nd of May 2019. If not, if this withdrawal agreement is not approved, then that extension will expire on the 11th of April. Now that means, Mr. Speaker, that any other extension that this House might desire to be agreed by the Union would be at its discretion, subject to the veto of 27 leaders. Therefore, by this evening, if the 11 o'clock deadline expires and the agreement has not been approved, that legal right will expire with it. This is, I will in a minute, not now. This is therefore the last opportunity to take advantage of our legal right. And the government has taken the view, Mr. Speaker, that it would have been wrong to allow that time and date to expire without giving this House the opportunity to consider whether it should avail itself of the legal right or whether it should move into a position where any further extension will be at the discretion of the 27 leaders. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm not taking interventions at the moment. I will in due course. I don't intend to be long, and I want to set out clearly the choice before the House today. The minimum necessary, therefore, in order to secure this right that is ours as a matter of law is that the withdrawal agreement is approved. All negotiated exits from the European Union will require this withdrawal agreement to have been approved. The Union has made it abundantly clear, and the decision...
Point of order. I hope it's a genuine point of order. Point of order, Mr. Stephen Doughty.
Speaker, the attorney refused to accept my intervention. Mr. Speaker, but I believe he may be inadvertently misleading us because he spoke very importantly about the date and the significance of today and the importance of the deadline this evening. However, I know, Mr. Speaker, that the government approached those of us working on the indicative votes process, asking us if we would reschedule our indicative votes business for today. So if that is the case, Mr. Speaker, why is there this significance? And surely the attorney is therefore misleading us about the significance of holding the vote today.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman, but it doesn't require adjudication by the chair. The Attorney General will have heard the point of order, and it is open to him to respond to it or not as he thinks fit. The Attorney General.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I will take interventions. I don't refuse it. I was just asking if he'd be patient. But let me deal with that point now. The government was considering asking that the indicative vote process continue this morning so that we could have brought a motion this afternoon or this evening. And the question was, yes, that's it. No, I won't. That's exactly what the thinking was. That's exactly what the thinking was. There is no desire by this government to interfere with the process that the House is currently undergoing. On the contrary, the motion acknowledges it and notes it, and I will come to it, if I may, in due course. Mr. Speaker, the minimum necessary to secure our legal right to an extension, therefore, is that this withdrawal agreement is approved. And all negotiated exits that any member of this House might conjecture or dream of will require this withdrawal agreement. Therefore, the House has before it a clear choice this morning. It can either approve this withdrawal agreement, knowing that by doing so it secures its right to an extension, or it can have declined to do so and know, in doing so, that by next week there will be no right to an extension, that any extension applied for will require some clear indication of the pathway forward and a stable majority behind it, and thirdly, that it is subject to the veto of those 27 member states. Now that brings me, Mr. Speaker, I will in due course, that brings me, Mr. Speaker, to the motion before the House. This motion sets out clearly that it is not a meaningful vote, pursuant to Section 13(1)(b) of the Act. It is designed solely to give the opportunity to this House of taking advantage of the right that we have in international law. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, it could not be a vote under Section 13(1) subsection 1, precisely because, Mr. Speaker, you have ruled, a ruling the government fully respects, that a meaningful vote cannot be brought back while it poses the same or substantially the same question to this House. Therefore, this motion has been designed to comply with your ruling, Mr. Speaker, and in complying with that ruling, it cannot comply with the requirements of Section 13 of the Withdrawal Act. Therefore, we put before the House the choice that the House faces today. What this choice will mean is that it will bring certainty to thousands of businesses and millions of individual citizens throughout this country, and to 1 million citizens of our country residing in the European Union. Now, Mr. Speaker, that is a not inconsiderable benefit. That certainty will be because, by taking the step of approving the withdrawal agreement today, it will set out a clear and certain pathway to our departure from the European Union. But let me come now to the political declaration. Now, I won't give way now, but I will give way to members in due course. I want to set out the choice before the House. As the motion acknowledges, the political declaration is open to change. The Union has accepted that it is open to negotiating change and that it will consent to discuss it. And so the House is undergoing a process at the moment of seeing whether a stable majority can be found for any political solution for the future. Of course, Mr. Speaker, the government respects that process. It acknowledges that it is continuing. It accepts, therefore, that further steps will be necessary to approve the political declaration in this House. This House will have to ratify not only the withdrawal agreement, but also the political declaration. And so the government will give consideration as to precisely how the full package will be approved with the political declaration. But one option for the House will be to introduce the EU Withdrawal Implementation Agreement Bill before this House. And if this agreement is approved today, the government will introduce the bill within the next few days. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
Grateful to him for giving way. Does he agree with me that the motion today flatly contradicts the European Union Withdrawal Bill, which specifically provides that we are required to have the motion passed by both sides of both the political declaration and the withdrawal agreement in place before we comply with the Act?
As the motion notes, the honourable member will understand, it notes that it is not purporting to be a Section 13(1) vote. This is simply designed to afford the House the chance of taking advantage of the legal right established by the Council decision. It is not. It is not a vote under Section 13. There's nothing unlawful. There is certainly nothing procedurally improper about it. It is done to afford the House this chance. I give way to the right honourable gentleman.
I'm very grateful to the Attorney General for giving way. I want to ask him about the consequences for any further extension of this motion passing today. Because if we get until the 22nd of May, but in the week leading up to that, it becomes clear that we have still not reached agreement on a political declaration. If we ask the EU for a further extension, are they not likely to say, I'm sorry, you can't have one because you did not take part in the European Parliament elections, and that therefore defeating this motion today will at least give us the chance to make that choice with an extension to the 12th of April, where we could get a longer extension. At the 12th of April, we could not get it if we go to the 22nd of May.
I understand the right honourable gentleman's point. I say straight away, the answer to that is this is the only right we have to an extension. If we move into next week without securing it, then we take the chance that of those 27 leaders, they will be vetoed. Now, the right honourable gentleman asks me about European parliamentary elections. Plainly, the stated position of the European Union is that we would have to organise and stand in those elections if we went beyond May the 23rd. Some lawyers, of course, disagree with that stated position and say that it would not be necessary, but that is the stated position of the Union. The point, however, I would say to the right honourable gentleman, is that we have the opportunity here to embrace certainty. What the right honourable gentleman's prescription? What the right honourable gentleman's prescription? No. What the right honourable gentleman's prescription would have us do is take a chance on the goodwill of the 27 member states of the European Union that they will grant us another extension. When, Mr. Speaker, this withdrawal agreement, everybody knows, the right honourable gentleman knows, is an essential prerequisite of our departure from the European Union. That may be why he doesn't want to vote for it. And the official Labour position is that they do not disagree or object to a clause or article of the withdrawal agreement. I have to say, the country looking on must judge this. They do not object. They have not emitted a peep of disagreement with a single clause or article of that agreement, and their position today is that they intend to vote it down. What kind of cynicism is that, Mr. Speaker? So I say to the House, the opportunity now is for us to embrace the certain legal right for an extension to May the 22nd. That will give us the opportunity of giving certainty to the country and allowing for the process of reconsideration of the political declaration to take place.
I'm most grateful to my right honourable and learned friend, and I entirely agree with him that, of course, apart from the dates of the 12th of April and the 22nd of May, any other extension for a longer period would have to be agreed with the other 27 member states. But is it not the case that it was made quite clear when the Prime Minister was at the last European Union summit that an extension to the 22nd of May was what was described as a technical extension for the purpose of simply bringing about what had been agreed fully and completely in this House? And that therefore, if we extend to the 22nd of May without having reached that conclusion now, we do run the very serious risk that we will not be able to extend further at that date if we have not completed all the parts of both the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration. Whereas, if we were to go back now and ask for longer, it will be given to us if we wanted to consider other options.
Well, I have to say, I know that my right honourable friend is a very distinguished and able lawyer, but I never knew that he had a crystal ball. The fact of the matter is, the European Union has not agreed to grant any longer extension. It will be subject to the veto of any of the 27, and it would certainly be subject to clear signs in this House that there was a stable majority for an alternative solution and a stable way of delivering it. So now I must make progress, but I will give way, particularly to the honourable gentleman. So I say to the House, the reason for the motion today, the reason for the form of the motion today, is that it enables the House to secure this legal right. It is the case that the government makes that this agreement is required in any event. The members on the other side do not dispute a requirement that it will be the requirement that there is for this agreement to be passed, and therefore we invite the House to secure the certainty of the extension, to continue with the process of the political declaration reconsiderations, to enable us by May the 22nd to have ratified the domestic implementing legislation and to have concluded discussions on the political declaration. I will give way first to the honourable gentleman and then to.
I'm grateful. The attorney's argument is basically that this is a way of guaranteeing certainty for business in the country. However, if today's motion is carried, there will be no certainty. Correct. The government will not be able to ratify the treaty, will it? Yep. I think he accepts that they won't be able to ratify. There will still have to be the proper motion brought forward to this House and the other, including both sides. There will still have to be a bill which will be much contentiously disputed. There is no certainty. If anything, today throws more uncertainty into the process.
There will certainly have to be the bill. There will have to be a process of ratification in this House, which is why, if the House votes for the withdrawal agreement today, it would be surprising if it didn't vote to implement the withdrawal agreement. And I would say this is the step that we need to take. May I just move on to the political declaration very briefly, if I may, to the right honourable gentleman.
To him. If we pass this motion today, and given we have business on Monday to continue to express our preferences, and if the Speaker was willing, would we not be able to bring forward a resolution which encaptured what we decide today, if it is to accept the divorce settlement, with, say, the motion that the Father of the House put to us to vote on this week, which came the nearest to being passed, that we would have the divorce settlement and other alternatives, including the customs union.
Plainly, that would be open to the House to do. The problem with it, I say to the right honourable gentleman, is that we would have lost the legal right to the extension. Therefore, we would be applying at the discretion of the Union to grant it to us. But let me come back, if I may, let me come back to the political declaration, because it's important I should say a few more words, if I may, about this. The process that is...
Mr. Speaker, I just wonder, I am seeking to catch the attention of the Attorney General. I just wondered whether he might have a loss of hearing or something.
And in my experience, the honourable gentleman is both noticeable and audible. The Attorney General.
Geoffrey.
Yes. The political... I will give way to the honourable gentleman in a moment, if I may, but let me just complete about the political declaration. The process is being undergone by the House at the moment. The government recognises that process and will in due course take decisions as to how and if it can implement anything that might emerge from it. But the whole point of the political declaration is that it cannot be negotiated with the European Union now. And what the government is saying, and there were some amendments down, I think, by the honourable member for Stoke Central, what the government is saying in connection with the next stage of the political declaration and its negotiation with the European Union is that there will be new mechanisms and new procedures so that this House can be properly consulted and have a particular role in the manner in which the political declaration, once it is finalised within this House, will be negotiated in that second stage. And I can say to the honourable member for Stoke Central, if I may, I'll give way to him in a moment, that the government would have accepted the amendments that he proposed with others standing in his name.
Can I thank the Attorney General for giving way? The amendment that I put down with colleagues today was very clear. But any process for this House would have to be underpinned by legislation. It would have to form part of the Withdrawal Agreement Implementation Bill, and there would have to be a clear role for this House to agree the future relationship before it was signed off with the European Union. Is he able to give a confirmation from that dispatch box that if he brings forward the bill next week, those measures will be in clear text in that bill in black and white?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, we would have accepted his amendments, clearly in terms of the detailed working out of those amendments, in discussion. No. If it requires, the honourable member will be able to bring forward an amendment. If it requires an amendment to that legislation, we would obviously consider its detail carefully, but we would be minded to accept such.
I am most grateful to the Attorney General. He has referred on a number of occasions to the Withdrawal and Implementation Bill. He knows, as does the Secretary of State for DEXU and the Prime Minister and others, that we, in my European Scrutiny Committee, have repeatedly asked over the last month for a draft or a copy of the Withdrawal and Implementation Bill. He's just said that if the withdrawal agreement goes through, then the Withdrawal and Implementation Bill will follow. Will he tell the House whether, if the withdrawal agreement is not approved today, whether the Withdrawal and Implementation Bill will come through to this House and be introduced in any event?
Well, what I can say to my honourable friend is that certainly we'd give it very careful consideration. We've taken the view up to now that before the withdrawal agreement is approved, it's premature to publish the bill. And secondly, there are certain elements of it that still remain to be finalised. But as I've said to my honourable friend privately, the moment we are in a position to do so, he, as chairman of the committee, will be among the first to see it. So I can say that. Now, I must, if I may, because I'm very conscious that it's Friday and that we need to move forward as swiftly as we can. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, The House can take a single decisive step today to afford certainty to the millions of people throughout this country who are waiting for it, to have a short extension, not prolonged, that will bring our exit of the European Union to May the 22nd. There will be no further uncertainty. The political declaration can be resolved in that time, and the ratification of the bill can proceed with any amendments that might be forthcoming in connection with the subsequent negotiating stage. So I submit to the House the responsible thing. I ask the House to consider and reflect carefully, because what we have before us today is the legal right to extend. No other extension is guaranteed. Every other extension would require European parliamentary elections, as the right honourable gentleman has said. We therefore are at an important crossroads for the purposes of this nation's future and its history, and I urge all members of this House to embrace this opportunity now, when this withdrawal agreement, in its substance, is in no way objectionable to any members of this House willing to consider moving forward with it. In those circumstances, what conceivable point can there be now in not embracing this agreement, subject to further discussions on the political declaration? Mr. Speaker, I urge the House to vote for this agreement.